Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra at D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Mark Etheridge. We are post-Thanksgiving. We have fought off the tryptophan haze that really, even before you eat the turkey, let's be honest, Thanksgiving week is kind of like a little bit of you're in a daze that week. It's slow. Like even, whether you have a desk job, whether you have one of our jobs, like that Thanksgiving week is always just kind of wonky and weird and slow. And, then Thanksgiving comes and you're watching football, and then it's just that week kind of disappears. So we're working our way out of it, and we're going to get back to business here this week. We are going to talk about, first off, Mark's piece that I would encourage you to read if you have not yet read it, on hypothetical SEC tournament scenarios. You may have heard the SEC is expanding to 16 teams starting in the 2025 season, with Texas and Oklahoma coming into the league. And that has some implications for the SEC tournament. So he wrote that piece with some hypothetical formats. So read that. If you have not read it yet, pause, go read it, and then come back to us, because we're going to talk about some of those scenarios, and it might help if you have looked at those before, so you'll know what we're referring to there. We're also going to talk a little about Mississippi State as a club. Mark and I both wrote about them recently. The fall report from Mississippi State just came out. Mark also wrote a piece really focused on the pitching side of it, because let's be honest, that's where they're going to make their bones next year if they're going to be better than they were last year. So we will dive into the Bulldogs a little bit on this episode as well. But before we get to any of that, I have to let you know that this episode of Highway to Hoover and every episode of Highway to Hoover is brought to you by Pitch Logic, the system used by players, coaches, scouts, and instructors at all levels of play, from youth leagues to the big leagues. The easy-to-use and affordable technology makes the platform accessible to every player at every level, all the metrics and features used at the highest level. See pitchlogic.com for more information. Mark, first off, good Thanksgiving, I trust.
Yeah,
are you
ate too much.
Are you?
Yeah.
Well, that's just kind of what's quickly. Listeners that listened to the last episode know that we did a little Thanksgiving segment, myself, Darren Hedrick, Dub Williams from Kentucky. So we won't go too long on Thanksgiving here, but are you a turkey or ham guy, first off?
Turkey.
Okay,
Turkey,
yeah, me too.
all the way. Yep.
What's your favorite side?
Probably hash brown casserole.
Oh, really? That's okay. That's off the board there.
Yeah. And basically it has cream cheese in it, with obviously hash browns, and then you can put shredded cheese. There's some the chicken cream chicken soup in it. It sets up really well. It's got a kind of crunchy on top. It's been a staple in our house for a long time, and it made an appearance again this year and was really popular.
Okay. That sounds delicious. As someone with lactose intolerance, however, that sounds like an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, it's a miss for you.
Cream cheese, cream of chicken soup. All of those words are just a no-go for Joe there.
And it's very filling. It's heavy.
Well, I'm a big mashed potatoes guy. That's pretty filling too. I like to imagine, as I'm just like shoveling mashed potatoes down my gullet, that they're filling up in my stomach, kind of like wet sand on the beach, when you kind of pile it on top of each other.
Can you do sweet potato casserole with you do the marshmallows and all that stuff?
Here's the thing. This was a big discussion at my Thanksgiving. I went out of town for Thanksgiving, went to Virginia Beach for Thanksgiving with some folks. And so we made a reservation at a place that was doing like a Thanksgiving buffet, which was really nice. We didn't have to cook. We didn't have to clean. It was wonderful. Life was very good. But we actually talked about this because they were serving a sweet potato casserole with marshmallows on top. There was some brown sugar kind of on top that gave it a little bit of that texture. I like the concept, sure. But as part of the Thanksgiving meal, I'm kind of out on it. Because, and my stepmom has always made that as part of now she doesn't do the marshmallows, but they do like a brown sugar kind of crust thing on top, and brown sugar topping, I should say. And she's always like, I don't know why you guys don't eat more of this. Like, this is just like dessert. And I'm like, well, exactly. I don't want a bite of dessert and then a bite of turkey and then a bite of dessert and then a bite of turkey. It just doesn't, there's like a dissonance in my brain about it. So I'm kind of out on it. it sounds like you are all the way in on it.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Are you taking pumpkin pie or the field pie wise?
The field. Pecan would
Yeah.
be my favorite.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. As a Texan, pecan pie, staple of my Thanksgivings growing up, less so lately,
Absolutely.
but certainly of I'm a pumpkin pie guy. So
Yeah.
that's tends to be where I go. It sits atop the, on the throne of pies for Thanksgiving for me. And so
And my
hard
grandmother
to,
used to make she had a homemade pecan pie recipe. My mom makes it now. So I've actually had the same recipe is for as long or for every Thanksgiving for as long as I can remember. I've had the same pie. So, I don't know how much is nostalgia and how much is do I really like it, but I eat it every year.
yeah, I mean, yeah, nostalgia probably plays a role. I saw pecan pie being made one time, just a staggering amount of sugar goes
Oh
goes
yeah,
into
it's
a pecan
horrible
pie
for you.
when you're making it from scratch, as I'm sure is the case with all pies, frankly.
Mhm.
But it's just like you look at a pecan pie and because maybe it's just because it's nutty. Like I don't associate it with being
It's the
like that
syrup,
sugary.
right? Yes.
Yeah, but oof, my goodness. Okay. Anyway, so we will move on from our Thanksgiving topic here. I hope everybody listening had a good Thanksgiving, however it is you celebrate. My family, in years where I've gone back to like my parents' house for Thanksgiving, which wasn't the case this year, they often do a non-traditional Thanksgiving. So like they've done Mexican food
Mhm.
on occasion, where they do enchiladas and tamales and um, et cetera, Mexican rice and queso and all that stuff. There's been years where we've done like seafood
Mhm.
for Thanksgiving, like seafood boils and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
We used
we
to do
tend to
that.
go off the board
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, like Christmas Day, we would have a big shrimp boil, and have a
Yeah,
bunch of people over and
I feel
just
like that is
have
like
fun,
that is
cook, and
kind of a
socialize.
Gulf Coast thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because half of the fun during the shrimp boil is all the cooking, right? The socializing and, trying to decide when it's ready and how long, doing the timing for everything. So,
hmm hmm
it's an event as much as it is a meal.
Mark and I, a couple of Gulf coastal elites, cutting it up on the
Air
podcast
boy.
here about seafood boils. All right, let's talk about the SEC tournament. As I laid out at the
Mhm.
top, um, the SEC tournament is going to have to change. Let me say that nothing has to happen. I think Mark and I anticipate it changing. I think the coaches that we talk to anticipate it changing.
Yep.
Mark and I can confirm they are actively discussing it among coaches in the SEC. That is a big topic of conversation right now. Some coaches, by the way, some coaches care more. We will name no names. Some care a lot more than others. Like there are some who really want to get in the weeds with you about it and want to like permutate with you. And there are
Mhm.
some that are like, yeah, man, just tell me what the format is and it's
Yeah.
whatever. Like I don't care
When
about
do I
that.
need to show up? Right.
Yeah, exactly. So it is just kind of funny to see the differences there. But so we anticipate it changing. And there are a couple things before I throw it to you, Mark, just to
Mhm.
kind of set the table here. Is one is that I mean, let's be real about this. Like a big factor here is I think there's also an eventuality where we're looking at an expanded NCAA tournament, right? And so I think that even with 64 teams, there is a concern among SEC coaches and the league more generally that
Mhm.
hey, we might if we just put 12 teams in this thing, who's to say we won't have when we have a 16 team league, who's to say we won't have 13 viable at large resumes? Now that's a
Mhm.
lot, but with the way the sport has kind of gone, I
Yeah.
don't think that's totally off the table. And we've discussed this before. It's somewhat reminiscent of discussion that was had, whatever it was, 15 years ago about an 8-team SEC tournament. And well, wait a minute, we have 9 teams that are deserving
Mhm.
or 10 or whatever. And that was an impetus behind the tournament expanding then. So we're having that same discussion now. But if the NCAA tournament goes to 72, that obviously makes that even more pertinent because now you're creating a little more wiggle room there for more teams to get in. So that's that. And then I think that one of the most interesting things about this for me, and um, I won't get us too off track here, but one of the big picture topics that I always find interesting is just what are conference tournaments for? Like, what is the point? And that sounds existential, and I don't necessarily mean it that way. I just mean it more in terms of like conference tournaments serve a lot of masters. So you're serving the fans, right? It's kind of a celebration of like, hey, come on down and hang out for a week, and sure, you'll watch your team's games, but you'll buy a day pass and you'll see your rival play and you'll see a couple other games, and then you'll hang out in town, and then it's like an event, right? I mean, you come to town and you're at the SEC tournament. You're not just there to see your team's games. And so there's that, but you're also serving the teams, right? You're creating a competition for them to determine who's going to go to the NCAA tournament broadly, but you're also serving the conference. Let's be real. Like, even if not every tournament or championship makes money, but you'd like to come at least as close to breaking even as you can. And we've seen the attendance of the SEC tournament. Like, there's money to be made there. So it's hard to serve all those masters and come out with a format that works for everyone. And so I'll use that to set the table, Mark, and kind of take us through your piece and kind of what you see as potential formats, and just wherever you want to take it, go ahead. I'm just going to throw the ball to you in the post and clear out.
Well, first off, to kind of answer your question of, well, why do we have a tournament, right? Well, look at the conferences that over the years have not had a tournament, and there's and everyone is shifting, right, to set up their own conference tournaments, and the reason for that is to give opportunities for wins to those teams and against good competition. Because depending on how the schedule falls, you could be playing a team that's actually going to hurt your RPI or hurt your resume, down the stretch, that final weekend. Where if you have a tournament, you continue to win. If your league's good enough, obviously that's going to help you. And for our audience, the SEC certainly. You're going to play SEC teams, your resume is going to improve. So then the question becomes, okay, we're going to have a tournament, but what does it need to look like? Well, in the old days when we had, an 8-team tournament, if you were 9th, you were 10th in the conference, there was a stigma attached to that. And I do think that there was, I heard conversation where you don't even make your conference tournament. How can you play for a national title, right? So the answer to that was to expand the tournament. Okay. And that's why we had, we have the 12-team format today with 14 teams. The bottom 2 don't make it. Well, with Texas and Oklahoma coming in, if you keep the same format, you've got 4 teams who would be left at home. And you might say, well, so what? Okay, they're the bottom 4. It doesn't matter. Well, with the consolidation of power, okay, across the country, and really all of the sports, but college baseball is no exception, the conferences at the top of the sport are just going to get stronger, right? As you see the expansion, you see the realignment. They're not taking programs, that are not winning programs, right? Everybody, the good teams are moving upward, all right, or the good programs that expend the most financial resources to be successful. Those are moving upward. As a result, you're going to people who hate these big conferences. You're going to even have more fodder to rail against, because they're going to continue to be more and more powerful because they have more resources, for all the obvious reasons, right? We're just making more money, NIL, transfer portal, student athlete opportunity and experience. All of those are in the favor of the large conference teams. So where does this all go, right? With a 16-team league, the coaches that we talk to, no one wants to keep it at 12. So what do you do, right? So the thought is, well, you could try to do like 14 and leave 2 at home, but the math on the bracket doesn't really work great with a 14-team tournament. If you were going to do 14, you would have already done it, right, with a 14-team league. So the thought is, well, let's do 16 and invite everyone. It'd be all inclusive. But it's not just as simple as adding another day. It already starts on Tuesday. It's Tuesday to Sunday. It's a marathon as it is. There's no appetite to start the thing on Monday. So how do you fit this in? And that's really the debate right now. I don't believe that there's a debate on should all 16 be included? At least not a serious one. The debate is on what's the best way to have a conference tournament. You don't have enough days to do pool play. You don't have enough days to do the double elimination that we're all used to. It's going to have to be some form of single elimination, or maybe some sort of mixed format where it's single elimination to a point and then it shifts, right, to double elimination, or vice versa, double elimination and shifts to single, right? So that's really the only way this is going to work in the time allotted. Okay. So I'll pause here, Joe. Is there anything to this point that I've left out or that we need to expand on before we go into the possible formats?
And not that you've left out, but so many of you mentioned, well, you can't really do pool play. You can't do this, can't do that. And that's kind of what I was getting at, which is just like, there are some logical answers that get taken off the table pretty quickly for reasons that are kind of specific to the calendar, specific to college. Like if this is pro sports, you can just move the calendar wherever you want, right? I mean, like, in the pandemic, weeks, the NBA like had 2 seasons in one, right? I mean, it just like, so we have these constraints here. We understand that. Pool play isn't obvious. It was 16 teams, 4-4, boom, boom. You play 3 pool play games. That determines you can go straight to the semifinals and then go from there. Single elimination, right? But it's like, we don't have enough time for that. But then it's like another thing. Here's another constraint, right? So if this were just about competition, you could say, and look, there's logistics in it, but let's just suspend disbelief a little bit. Okay, we'll play pools A and B, or 1 and 2, or whatever they label them, in Hoover, and then we'll play pools C and D at Regents Field in Birmingham. Right. And then we'll play the semifinals and finals in Hoover because we want to give them because of our relationship with Hoover, we want to give them the best games. Right. Okay. Like, again, if this was all about competition, great. Like that's cool. And I've actually been an advocate before of like, we should probably talk about split location conference tournaments, but therein lies the issue of, okay, but then we start to push up against the business of this. And I'm not saying it's anything nefarious. It's just reality. If I'm the Hoover Met, I'm going to go, whoa. Hold on. Right. And they have every right to. We've got a contract. So that's why I say, like, this is where the serving all these masters comes in, is just like so many of these potential options that would be cool. Or, I mean, heck, 16 teams single elimination would be a different kind of cool. But okay, well, now we're lopping off a day of the tournament. And like, they're not going to want that. Right. So many of the options that could be neat or interesting or innovative, we're just kind of in a box. And that's kind of what makes, I mean, frankly, it's what makes it worthy of writing an article about, is because we're having to work inside these constraints. And so that's where we start to get into like what I would describe as the next, second and third level ideas from some of the more basic ones that we just can't do for one reason or another.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I do think that part of this is trying to continue an event that's been really popular, and that people plan, they make the plans to come every year. So how do you not disrupt anything and continue the momentum, that this event has enjoyed? I mean, people name podcast after the journey to Hoover. What do we call it?
I've heard that. Yeah.
It's Road to Hoover. What was the term? I forget.
I don't remember. I'll look it up.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what you're trying to do here. So, the multi-venue has its challenges, and also, single elimination all the way through has its challenges as well. Because you're going to have fewer games. So you sell, fewer tickets, that's fewer revenue, and you can have a lot of teams going to show up and play one game, right? You can have 8 of them, right? So,
which, I mean, it sucks for the fans, right? I mean, you play on day one, you kind of know that's the case. But if you're, an LSU fan, you win the league, hypothetically, like, you're kind of expecting to be around a couple of days. But if you get upset on day one, like, well, that's all she wrote. Back to Baton Rouge we go, and like,
right,
that sucks.
and if you're the 1 seed and you get upset by the 16 seed, I mean, it's just kind of an interesting scenario that we don't face today. So you could do that, and you could do the 116 and 215 and do the S curve all the way through, but I don't think that's what's going to happen. Um, what I expect will happen will be to give the teams that need games more opportunities to play. Okay, because honestly, if you're one of those 1 through 4, I mean, you're not playing for anything typically in Hoover. Um, maybe you want to play a little bit to get some guys some work. You don't want to go 2 weeks without playing, but playing a game or playing 2 games is probably about right. Okay, so you don't really want to do that. So I do think that you could come up with a scenario where you had like 9 versus 16 on the first day, right? Those bottom 8 teams, and they would play each other, right? 9, 16, 10, 15, 11, 14, 12, 13. That you see where I'm going there. And then each one of those would advance, and then they would play the next 4 teams, right? Those 4 winners would play 5 through 8. Okay, so you're getting more opportunities against similar teams. You're getting a chance to kind of, teams that you jockeyed with in the standings, you're close together. You get to play those teams and with an opportunity to help your resume to move forward. And maybe you're taking their spot, or maybe you both get in, right? If you can both do well. Compared to the other bowl teams. So, and then once you do there, then you invite, the third day is when 1 through 4 shows up. Okay, so those teams at the bottom would have had 2 opportunities to get into that that final 8. Okay, so if I'm making sense here, you're giving an opportunity for teams that need to play. You're letting them play, and then everyone else. Okay, you still get to come to the party, but you get to show up late. You make an entrance at the end, and maybe still play for the title. Okay, you've earned it based on how you've done all year. So then it would be interesting to me because then you're getting to you get that third day it finishes, and then you're getting into basically a winner's bracket. Um, and if you wanted to, you could just play it on out, right? But what and finish it in a day early. Maybe finish it on Saturday, or either start it a day later, right? But what I would suggest is then shifting to a double elimination and giving people, having your best attended days, your Friday, your Saturday, your Sunday, having those games be super meaningful with ideally your best teams who have had the best year, have them facing off against each other, either in a winner's bracket game, that winner take all kind of game, or an elimination game, right? So you're at the end of the week, you got some teams with some momentum. People can start showing up through the week as they continue to win, and I think shifting to double elimination there. Once you get to the bottom 4, it's kind of your old school regional, right, format at that point. And then you take it into Sunday, and whoever's left would be champ. So I think there's some advantages to that. Obviously, some disadvantages in that you're still going to have a lot of people who are going to show up and they're going to play one game. But with 16-team league, I don't really know a way around that unless you're going to go multi-venue, or you're going to add days. And I don't think there's an appetite for either.
Yeah, I think what you ultimately kind of land on is the what you put forward is your favorite ideas. I think it does a good job of kind of giving everybody what they want here,
It's a
team wise.
compromise, right?
Yeah. So if you need the games, you're going to get the games. If you're a team that's won a bunch, it reduces your risk for injuries, obviously, but then
Mm-hmm.
fatigue, really, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also from a standpoint of the top seeds, you also will more or less be able to stay on a weekend schedule, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's assume the previous weekend's series will be Thursday through Saturday like they are now, but then you'll basically have the same time next week. You'll start up, and then the next
Yep.
week for regionals. So we know how much coaches love to be able to stay on schedule and have routines and so on and so
Right.
forth. Top seeds would be able to do that. I also think it reduces the likelihood of a situation where, look, you can kind of get caught out in these tournaments with, let me try to think of the right example here. Well, Auburn was a 5 seed last year in the tournament, right? So they had to play on day one, but we're in pretty good shape. By that point, we thought like probably hosting, things would have had to really get wonky for them not to, right? But they win their opening game. Well, now they're stuck, and I'm using air quotes for those who are just listening and don't see the video. Now they're stuck in Hoover for 2 more days. And like, okay, they're an in-state team. They could bus back to Auburn. It really wasn't that big of a deal, but pick any other team that would have had to like travel a long way. Right. So you can end up stuck in Hoover for a couple of extra days that ultimately matters zero for your postseason positioning. And so you have kind of reduced some of that downside risk for teams to, because I mean, that's a storyline every year, not just in the SEC, but every conference tournament for some of these teams. And I remember last year, Tony Vitello for Tennessee, kind of after they lost, saying like, you know what, like we're looking forward to getting home and practicing and getting these guys some rest and, kind of like setting everything up for regionals. And then you have other teams that, kept their pedal to the metal. And look, you want to lift a trophy at the end of the week. I get that. I'm not discounting that, but you do sometimes kind of sense coaches say that they end up saying things like, we're going to try to win, but not at all costs. Right. And so that's like the coded language of like, look, we can kind of take it or leave it. Right.
Cause there's a bigger goal the following week. Right.
Right. And so I say all that to say the formats you lay out kind of allow for a scenario of like, there's less of that, like kind of where we got 1 foot in and 1 foot out. It gives you an opportunity where the off ramps are such that we'll have fewer instances where the motivations seem to be kind of unbalanced, if you will.
Right. And the top teams are not going to have to play 5 games in 5 days. Right. I mean, technically, I guess you could play 4, but that would be the absolute most if you're one of those top 4 seeds, and that's double elimination. So I do think that you can. I mean, look at Vanderbilt last year won the conference tournament, and then who knows? Maybe that took something out of them in regional play, right? So I would want to have it so if you're playing all these games to get to the championship, that you're really playing for something, right? You're trying to improve your stock. Vandy had nothing to play for other than pride, and kudos to them. I mean, they kicked butt and got the trophy, but you would like to see it. If somebody's going to go on a run like this, it's, they're trying to host, or they're trying to get in the field, or, whatever, other than, it's already sewn up, man. We're just here. We're just playing for momentum and pride. So I do think, that's the balance that people are trying to strike and haven't really found it. There are other, formats and variations of this and others that we can look at. But that was the one I landed on. Basically, the premise is getting as many games as you can for the teams that need to play those games.
Yep. So yeah, if you've not read it, go read Mark's piece on these SEC tournament formats. I also be curious if there are some. I know there are some real wonks out there that kind of nerd out about this kind of stuff. If you have like a really, excuse my French, batshit crazy idea, like please send it to us because I just be I mean, does it? Not going to happen probably, but I'd love to hear some just like wild ideas about how to do this. So send them our way. You know where to find us on social media. So send those to us if you've got like just a totally bonkers concept, because we'd love to because read about it and maybe debate on the show. Yeah, I mean that's exactly right. Yeah, it takes one to know one. So all right, Mark, let's move on to talking a little bit about Mississippi State, a team that, here's a segue, hasn't been in Hoover the last 2 years. Much to their chagrin, and you don't have to tell anybody in Starkville that's not up to the standard that they hold themselves to. I wrote the Mississippi State Fall Report, which went up just the other day. You actually contributed, it was a co-byline. You contributed reporting for that as well, so we kind of tag teamed it. But you also had a separate piece that really focused on the pitching side of things for Mississippi State, and that's understandable. I think we all understand that was there were several different issues for Mississippi State the last couple of
Mhm.
years, and last year in particular. But pitching was the big one. Team ERA in SEC play, like above 950, which is just
Yeah, when
unfathomable. Overall ERA was just above 7, which is bad enough as it is, but 950 something is just unbelievable. And so a lot of things went wrong there. Things really snowballed on them. Defense also wasn't good, but really the pitching feeds into that, right? I mean, the ball was just, there were always runners on base. The ball
Yep.
was always in play. So that's going to hurt your defense, right? You're just going to get a lot more chances. So, or you're going to press and try to make plays you don't need to make, yada, yada, yada. So I think we understand why that is, but Mark, I'll throw it to you. What did you focus on in this piece, and what did you take away from where Mississippi State on the mound is, are what we're going to need to see in 2024 for them to be markedly better?
Yeah, I mean, Justin Parker's the new pitching coach, had a lot of success at South Carolina. So a lot of these same guys that showed flashes a year ago, but just didn't have the consistency, just weren't productive enough. They return, and the problem, I mean, there's some really good stuff here. So there's potential. It's just how much pitchability are you going to get, and I think that's going to be what everyone's watching for this first month of the season before SEC play is how sharp are they, and do they look like they're going to be able to just hold their own in SEC play, because I think their offense is going to be good enough. Their offense is at worst SEC average, which makes you among the best offenses in the country, with a chance to be really special. So, um, obviously Geronimo St. is a guy everyone's going to focus on. He's the both-handed pitcher, really big stuff, especially right-handed. He is a draft eligible sophomore. So he's one of these guys that's going to get a lot of interest. One, just because of how unique, having a guy who's that good, a pitcher from both sides, but just also they need him to take that step forward, and he's certainly talented enough to do it. So I see who is it. Colby Holcomb would be another guy that
Yeah.
that is just having an incredible fall, taking a big jump, is really flourished, with Parker. He looks the part. I mean, he's central casting for an SEC Friday night guy. Can he do it? Once the lights come on. And they have a lot of different different options. Bradley Lofton's a guy who pitched really well in limited action as a freshman. Was more of a midweek guy and had some injury things late in the year, and but it's big time stuff, and he could be a guy, right? And then bringing in junior, D1 transfers. We call Steven Carson. Is it Carson Ligon? How do you say that? Well,
Ligon. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Ligon. Okay, so
Yeah.
I mean, Ligon was at Miami, was a weekend starter for them, a lot of experience. Steven was at Purdue, a weekend starter for them. So guys who had pitched in big games have been the guy, right? So it gives you some options for Mississippi State. And then, I think because you've got some depth, the problem the last couple of years has been injuries, right? And so maybe, you know, everybody tends to have some sort of injury, at least minor or major, sometime through the year. Maybe they've got enough to withstand it, right? If a guy goes down for a couple of weeks, it's not the end of the world, because you have someone ready to elevate. So I think that's going to be the key. Offensively, they're going to be strong, and I think they'll be a little better defensively as well. It's a team that needs some good things to happen to it. They need to get off to a good start, and then SEC play. They open against the defending national champions LSU. So you need to be, you need to be having some success to have some momentum heading into SEC play, because that's going to be a monster series with so much riding on it, just from the symbolism of that whole weekend.
Yeah, I think there's a chance for them to be better defensively, but what I will say, I mean, they do have some key guys. So and Colton Ledbetter was a good bat, but also was a true center fielder.
Hmm.
And it kind of sounds like Connor Heisek, who was a transfer from
Yeah.
VCU, who last year didn't play a ton, is going to get a crack at center field. Now, maybe that doesn't stick, but he certainly sounds to me like they're going to give him a shot at it. And he's a
Yeah.
converted infielder, and maybe he'll be great at it. I don't know, but that is certainly a question, right? You know, how good is David Mershon full time at shortstop, or is it Dylan Cupp? Right?
All
Does
right.
Dylan Cupp, and he is a plus defender, is he ready for the speed of the SEC? Like a lot of the things that I've read about him and seen from him suggest that
Mhm.
yes is the answer, but you know, we'll have to wait and see on that. And then behind the plate, Ross Highfield probably going to get a lot of the reps. Now they did bring in some veteran
Mhm.
help behind the plate, so if things get, because Highfield is kind of thought of as an offensive
Yeah.
catcher rather than a defensive guy, so you could maybe move him somewhere else just to get his bat in the lineup and catch Johnny Long, who's a pit transfer, or they've got a JUCO guy whose name escapes me, but you could do some other things.
Mhm.
So I think there's a chance they're better defensively, but I also think they still have questions there. And when I look at the mound, because that is the biggest thing, they're gonna get, at least on paper, they're gonna be healthier, which you like. I think it's good for the bullpen. They're gonna get Stone Simmons back, Brooks
Mhm.
Auger in that mix, and if those two guys are as good as advertised, if as good as we saw in the times we saw them on the mound, those are a couple guys who can really handle the back end and can shorten games
Mhm.
for you. So that's a big positive there. Um, just getting a new voice in the dugout with Justin Parker, I think that's helpful. The proof's in the pudding with him as well. Did a nice job at Indiana, did a nice job at South Carolina. So there's that. But my big picture concern with the pitchers, though, at least on paper, is that the guys who have the stuff to miss bats aren't in the strike zone. And the guys who are in the strike zone don't have the stuff that misses bats. Right.
Mhm.
And so that is way overly simplistic. But you look at Colby Holcomb, you look at Senja, you look at Bradley Lofton. Those guys have two things in common from the numbers we saw last year anyway. Big time stuff,
Mhm.
big walk totals. And I think you can coach some of that out of guys. Like, I'm not saying that can't get better. But we know last year, SEC strike zones, pretty small.
Mhm.
And so if you're spraying it a little bit, that strike zone gets smaller. We kind of know that's just like a human element thing. Is it's hard, you tend to not get as much leeway if you're not consistent with your strike throwing. And so does that strike zone feel like it's about as big as a coffee can for pitchers? Is that going to be a thing? And then they bring in Cal Steven and Carson Ligon, who are guys that, have had success. And Cal Steven pitched well in the Cape over the summer. I saw him with my own eyes, and on paper, their stuff is pretty good. Cal Stevens, a fastball, low 90s. He'll touch a mid 90s. Ligon, kind of the same thing. Cal Steven also really looks the part physically. It's like 6'4", 225, really smooth delivery. But you look at the numbers, you kind of look under the hood at their numbers, and neither of them really misses bats. Last year, neither of them had like a big breaking ball that had a 40-45% whiff rate. They were all low 30% whiff rates, which is average to slightly below average. Neither of them have like a 99 mile an hour fastball, right? I mean,
Mhm.
they throw strikes. I mean, so that is something. But if you're going to have to give in to SEC hitters, I mean, neither of them have pitched in the SEC. ACC, very good league, not throwing shade, but neither of them have pitched against the SEC. And you and I know if you're having to throw a lot of strikes, like over the fat part of the plate, like you better
Yeah.
be Paul Skeens if you're going to get it past people. Not saying they can't, not saying they won't get better. I'm just saying that, like, when I look at this, that's where kind of my concern is. They've got guys with stuff. We got to get them in the zone. They've got guys who are in the zone, but they don't necessarily have the best stuff, right? The one
Mhm.
exception I will say is Nate Dome. Nate Dome
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
zone,
We hadn't talked
good
about him. Yeah.
stuff. And he's going to be a key guy. I think the best version of Mississippi State is if Nate Dome can be a starter,
Right.
because he strikes me as a guy who, let's assume he can start. He could be a high-end Friday dude in the SEC.
Mhm.
But there are some question marks there, right? They tried that a little last year and it went okay, but then he got kind of banged up, so we never really got to see the
And
extension
they
of
just
that.
had nothing behind him, right? So he,
Right.
if you had him at the end of the game, you felt pretty good about that game. But if you started him, I mean, he gives you 4 or 5 innings, and then what, right?
Yeah.
And then
Right.
the
Right.
walls came crumbling down. So I think the big picture for them is there are more options. Um, if they have the rash of injuries, they honestly have more than enough guys they feel are capable of stepping forward. It's just they've got to do it, right? And we aren't going to know. We can sit here and talk about it, but we aren't going to know, and probably until about April, right? Once you've gone through 3 or 4 SEC series and you start to figure out all your roles and everybody stretched out, then you'll have an idea. Till then, it's all just it's going to be a lot of fun, but it's all just wait and see, and until that point.
There are a couple things just to touch on the lineup a little bit because it deserves mentioning. We've both kind of alluded to it, but I mean, Hunter Hines, could he be a 30 home run guy? Like, I think he could, honestly.
Mhm.
Set the Cape Cod League wood bat home run record over the summer. He hit 22 last year, so it's not like we're asking him to double his output. So, I think that's on the table for him. He's an SEC Player of the Year type of guy. If State is good and he puts up a monster year, he's in that discussion. And then I feel like one of the big keys is Dakota Jordan what he was last year, which by the end of the year was a very
Yeah.
solid, very good offensive contributor, or is he also an SEC all conference SEC Player of the Year type of guy? Because talent wise, that's in there. Can he
Mhm.
just put it all together to be that guy? But I don't talk to anyone who doesn't think that his talent is on that level. It's just a matter of can he put it all together? And if he does that, if Hines is Hines, if he does that, if Dylan Cupp is ready from day one, or just really ready by SEC play, let's say,
Mhm.
it's Amani Larry's a nice player, like Ross
Yeah.
Highfill, lots of power there. Like again, the lineup I think is going to be at bare minimum perfectly fine, and
Mhm.
at best could be one of the best 3 or 4 in the
Right.
conference.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of pressure, right?
Mhm.
For that offense. Like last year in the games they won, it was like we got to really score, and they did. Sometimes it just wasn't enough. So I could really buy into this Mississippi State lineup being really, really good based on some of those contingencies. But what I'd like to see more is just that lineup just be what they are and have the pitching and defense improve enough to where they end up having a lot of balance. That's just like a easier way to live. And we'll see. Obviously, we'll just kind of have to see. And an interesting subplot of this as we move towards next season is that Ole Miss is kind of in a similar spot. Now, their
Yeah.
problems are a little more balanced, right? Like their pitching wasn't as bad, but their offense also wasn't as good as Mississippi State's. They kind of like met them in the middle. And they're turning over a lot in the lineup. Well, I shouldn't say their offense wasn't as good. I mean, I guess that's up for debate. I shouldn't have been so dismissive of that, but regardless, they're losing a lot on offense. So I think we can assume on paper State's offense probably a little better, but have a lot of the same issues. And it's really, really hard for me to believe Mike Bianco is going to have 2 bad teams in a row. Of course, I also thought it would be kind of impossible for this version of Mississippi State to have 2 bad years in a row, and yet here
Yeah.
we are. So
Right.
that will be something to watch. I need to do some reading up on Ole Miss. I don't have that fall report. Our friend and colleague Aaron Fitt has that fall report, so that'll be coming out at some point in the coming days. But so I'll just need to kind of like really dig into that. But that's going to be an interesting because it kind of burns both of those teams. The idea that one of them could leave the other behind next year and all that. So I'll be interested to kind of dig into that and see which team I feel more confident in 2024. Because as I stand right now, I'm not really sure what answer I'd give you, to be
Yeah.
honest.
And it's such a weird deal because we didn't see the whole Mississippi State plummet falling 2 years ago. We didn't see that. We didn't see Ole Miss, dropping back like they did last year. Will there be someone else this year who does it, right? That no one's expecting, no one's thinking about, because for Ole Miss and Mississippi State to take a jump up, somebody's got to come back down. Okay, so maybe not to the levels that they are, but you there's only so many wins, right? There's a winner and loser in every game. So this is going to be fascinating as we try to figure these teams out, these programs out, not only for this year, but as we move forward. College baseball is changing so much, the landscape, all the consolidation of the power is heading into smaller number of leagues. So there are only so many wins to be had and only so many places in the sun for all these programs that they're all pushing towards. So lots of fun stuff, as we try to figure this out.
Conference play with respect to the NCAA tournament is really nothing more than a math problem, right? Every game's a zero-sum game.
Yep.
And so when you look at, okay, if you had, what did State have last year in conference? 9 wins. I mean, the funny thing is 4 wins doesn't sound like much. And I guess it's not, but like, that's all they really were away from being a bubble team, right? Yep. Is 4 wins. I mean, I guess their overall record wouldn't have been great, but like, but regardless, so, okay, you need to add 4 wins. Well, okay. If Ole Miss is better,
where are they coming from? Right.
You're going to Alabama, Auburn, LSU, A&M, and then whoever you play in the East, which I don't have in front of me, but I could guarantee that's tough too. So yeah, it's just, you got to find wins somewhere. And so 4 wins doesn't sound like much, but I don't know, man, like you're taking 4 wins away from someone, and that's always a hard thing to kind of game out. So that will certainly be an interesting subplot to follow as we head towards 2024. But I think that is an episode. That's going to do it for this edition of Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra at d1baseball.com. Programming note, Mark, for his mysterious day job, is going to be out of town next week. So I will be doing not a solo episode because woof, talking this long by myself while I could do it. I don't think anyone wants that. So I will have a guest of some sort on, and I'm not going to bluff you guys. I don't even know who it's going to be yet, but we'll figure it out. Joe's going to have a guest, so you will not see Mark next week. I know everyone is
load management
about that.
We're calling it.
That's right. Load management. Mark is a franchise player, so we need to monitor his minutes.
He's strong.
So yes,
for the season.
Yeah. Much like the Stars sitting out the NBA in-season tournament, Mark is sitting out next week. So I will carry the load in his stead, and we will have a guest, but we will continue to bring, regardless of who is involved, we will continue to bring Highway to Hoover to you weekly as we get into the regular season, which don't look now is like 80 days away, roughly, something like that. So coming fast. So no kidding. Absolutely do not. Anyway, that'll do it for this edition of Highway to Hoover. Thank you to Pitch Logic for sponsoring this and every episode of the show. Thank you, Mark, as always, for joining me, and thank you, the listener,